Good afternoon to everybody. My name is Scott Rosen, and I'm one of your hosts today for our TALA session on the current and future state of hiring. We're thrilled to have you join us today. So thank you so much for taking some time to be with us. And it's going to be a very interactive session. We're going to hear, get a chance to hear from each of you about what you're seeing right now, and also what you think you're going to be seeing in the future. So for those of you who don't know, many of you I know are TALA participants from past events, but TALA stands for Talent Acquisition Leadership Alliance. Contemporary Staffing and the Rosen Group kind of co-run the group, and we used to do quite a few live events every few months, and now we're switching over to the webinar approach, at least for a while. And you'll see up there all the different folks that are going to be joining us and facilitating today. So we're really excited to have you be part of our group, and we're going to have a really good discussion. So the agenda, and Evan's going to go into a little bit more detail about what exactly we're going to do, but once we finish our introductions, we're actually going to go into breakout groups, which is a really kind of interesting and cool feature of the technology. And we're going to have smaller, more intimate opportunities for everybody to participate and share their thoughts on what's going on now and in the future of talent acquisition. So it's going to be a great opportunity. Each group will have a couple of 1 or 2 facilitators, and we'll have a note taker, and then we're going to come back and report out. There are going to be some questions that'll be there for you to prompt you and help you along the way. So the last thing I'm going to just mention is the restrooms are, no, I'm sorry. The next thing before I turn it over to Evan is what I'm seeing in talent acquisition. Again, I'm just going to be very authentic from my point of view and try to just, tell you what I've seen and what I've been hearing from both talent acquisition leaders and also from consultants to the industry. So, I think in particular, the recruiting function has gotten hit particularly hard. Now, of course, different industries are going to have different experiences. But, I've heard, story after story of companies that have either put staffing on hold or, they're only filling, critical needs. And then I've heard stories of some people who are, robust and it's business as usual. So again, everybody's got a different story, but, recruiting's been hit pretty hard. And, being that I'm part of the staffing industry, placing HR people, I've seen the HR function in particular has been hit pretty hard as well. As far as the future is concerned, in general, I've talked to a few consultants. We're starting to see some signs of the return to work strategy and starting to see some of the staffing processes opening up and companies starting to think about hiring again, working with outside staffing agencies and things like that. So we don't know. No one really knows for sure exactly when things are going to get back to where they were before. But we're seeing those signs of moving in that direction. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share at this point. I'm going to turn it over to Evan now to talk a little bit about what's going to happen today. And Evan, pass the baton to you.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Scott. And thank you, Sharon, Steve, and Nick, and Maribel for your help putting this together today. And especially thank you to our moderators who volunteered to help lead our discussions. We hope that everyone finds a lot of impact and value out of this. And Scott, great examples in regards to what you're hearing and seeing. I think, without being redundant, from our perspective, we're seeing and hearing a lot of the same things. We are seeing recently locally with states starting to open back up, companies beginning to want to pipeline more. But, it's definitely thrusted us all into thinking more strategically and having recruiters really work on some of the foundational parts of the recruitment process, whether it be advertising, social media, working with hiring managers, interview process. So hopefully everyone's finding a lot of opportunities through this as well to enhance some of those factors within their own teams. So today we're looking to engage everyone in a small breakout group and share what you've been experiencing with the facilitator. It is definitely important because we want to be respectful of everyone's time, that we try to stick to about 2 or 3 minutes to give everyone in the group a chance to speak. After we go through the full circle, we will have more time to add commentary, thoughts, and possibly even questions to some of the members of the team. The facilitator or team lead will bring back a summary of what each group shares to the audience, to all of us here. And we'll each have a chance to share what each group discussed in the ways of best practices, thoughts, and like Scott said, what maybe we can all anticipate for a future across different verticals and industries. So we're asking that you have your video turned on for greater effectiveness and a real connection. Of course, that's completely optional, but we do feel as though that personal touch will make for more impact as we all talk together in our groups. And I'm going to briefly take us through the topics, and then I'll throw it over to Steve to kick into the event. So remember, the title of the webinar that we want to launch is just one question: the current and future state of hiring by industry for talent acquisition leaders. So we're going to be talking through some really great topics as you see. What is happening to the TA strategies that we are deploying? Are there any results worth sharing? Which industries are hiring and which ones are on hold? What challenges are you currently facing? How are talent acquisition functions dealing with remote and virtual hiring? What are the projections for hiring in the future? How are you managing stress for yourself and your team? Are you in transition? What are your prospects for landing your next gig? And what advice would you offer job seekers, as well as what are the key changes in the hiring practices resulting from the pandemic? So again, just as a reminder, we may not get through all topics, so we share these with you in advance so that you guys can start thinking about what topic may hit the most for you that you'd like to touch on. And we will be taking notes in each of our groups and looking forward to a really great event. So with that, I'll throw it over to Steve Pearson.
Thanks, Evan. Welcome, everybody. Can everybody hear me? We're good. I'm seeing a little frozen on my end of the video. Great. Thanks, Lynn. So I'm Steve Pearson. I'm Chief Strategy Officer with Contemporary Staffing Solutions, for those of you who do not know me. I've been with the company 25 years, and I want to start off by, obviously thanking everyone. I actually partnered with Scott Rosen years ago, and we tried to, like Scott mentioned, we wanted to really create a very safe environment for talent acquisition leaders where we can share strategies, things we can execute on. And clearly in these times of, recession, they just said started in February 2020. We'll see how long that goes. We've been through this before. COVID has been a huge hit. The social unrest and, quite frankly, the racial injustice, I think, is going to impact and affect how we go about training and recruiting, right? And it's just all these different things we're being hit with in 2020. So this should be a really good group. We've tried to create TALA as a safe environment for all of you just to speak up. I think it'll be pretty robust and fun. I think I want to thank personally Sharon Sal, Maribel Descala, and Nick Life. They all work for Contemporary Staffing Solutions. Their project manager, Sharon, is the Chief Marketing Officer, and they've done a great job putting this together. And it's a lot of work, but they do it because they have a real passion for it. So with that said, we're going to break into our mini sessions. And I want to remind everybody, this is like speed. It's a speed meeting, but it's, we want to give people time to talk. So kind of like speed dating, right? So we want to collect business intelligence on the current and future state of hiring for future talent acquisition leaders based on the industry and your company that can help others on what you're doing creatively and strategically to attract talent in these turbulent times. We might have time for a little rapport building and fact checking. It depends on how many people are in each group. We are going to ask somebody to be a note taker. So if somebody could volunteer in the group to be the note taker, I am a facilitator and I will go first. So all facilitators will go first to kind of give you a feel for what we're looking for. We're never going to get through all these 9 questions. We're going to use them as a benchmark. But keep in mind, the biggest thing that we really want to get out of is a solid pulse on your industry, what's happening, what you're doing creatively, And then we're going to start with your name and jump right into it. We're going to have 25-minute breakouts and then come back, and the facilitators will report back to the group, and we'll have questions and answers. Sound good? So we are good. So I was going to say, let's jump into our breakout sessions.
Sharon Sal here, and I hope you all had a fabulous breakout session. We did manage to get around our room. There were 6 of us, and I am going to expedite sharing with you what we just learned. So basically, we learned about the transportation industry, specifically Amtrak. They have spent a lot of time fixing their tracks and fixing their trains, so we're thrilled about that. They also went back on route last week, and they are beating the airplanes in terms of number of tickets being sold because they have easier social distancing that they can handle. We also learned about the transportation business. We also learned about the logistics business, which has 2 businesses, distribution and transportation. They do have a hiring freeze. They're calling it a hiring defrost because they're gradually bringing people back. And they've got many businesses that are in e-commerce and in essential businesses. So basically, they are ramping back up very quickly, and corporate still has the freeze or defrost, but the rest of the businesses that are trying to move the transportation and the distribution are on fire. They're very busy, but they're very short-staffed. There is a very common theme called labor sharing at everybody that we spoke to. So people feel like their skills are being upgraded. They're getting more training. They're having a chance to do to learn themselves. So they're liking that. We learned about a law firm that does all corporate law. They have had a hiring freeze at corporate, which seems to be the theme, but they are also continuing to be effective, productive, businesses moving forward. The lawsuits have not stopped, they're moving forward. So they're also enjoying the opportunity to learn new things and labor share. We also learned about the hospitality business and how difficult it is for many people in that industry who do not really have computers. That's not their job. They spend the majority of their time serving others. And so, but they do work closely with the different universities, and they are coming up with plan A, B, C, and D and trying to flex and be prepared for what has to be next. My last industry, actually second to last industry, is the education industry, and they are full steam ahead hiring for September, and they're also planning A, B, C, and D because they're not quite sure if they're going to officially open in the classroom or whether it's going to continue to be virtual. So last but not least, the staffing industry is seeing a plethora of businesses, a variety of industries that are telling us, who's still quiet and who is still actively hiring, but there is a general consensus that businesses are hiring again. In the corporate offices, the freezes are defrosting. With that, I'm going to take the time to turn the table to Evan Violet. I hope you all found value in this, and we will write this out and share it with you. Evan, you're up.
Cool. Well, thank you, Sharon. Love the defrosting wording there. That's awesome. So we had a really impactful session as well. We did battle through a couple technical difficulties, but we made the most of it. And I will say that in adding to what you said, Sharon, not being redundant, manufacturing, mental health and wellness, and generally speaking, we are seeing more industries than not start to throw up postings. But financial services, manufacturing, and mental health certainly are industries that we're seeing a lot of movement in. As we're talking about hiring, we had a couple people bring up some really great points that recruiters really should be specifying whether they're recruiting for a specific role or building a pipeline. A couple members were in transition and referenced how much they appreciated hearing if a position was building a pipeline versus actually specifically looking to fill a role. So that type of transparency is being very well received. In the ways of what strategies are being deployed, Corporate employees, you know, for the most part, have begun working from home a few months ago, so it's become the new normal. However, manufacturing, a lot of plant employees did have to go in. So there was a lot of procedures put in place and very strict procedures allowing to maintain social distancing and, you know, filling out surveys to make sure that everyone is feeling well and able to do the job. Other strategies are offering flexible schedules, keeping business moving forward as smoothly as possible, being empathetic to employees that may need to work more flexible schedules, dealing with children that are out of school and other factors that are hitting their lives. Definitely talking about what strategies TA can do, obviously creating drip campaigns and developing a very authentic employee brand and employee value proposition. And it was noted that the employee value proposition does not need to be the same as the employer branding or the employee branding rather, but they do need to be tied together. So we talked a lot about how TA folks can really take this time to create a very authentic employee value proposition to differentiate as the defrost becomes full speed. Moving further into some of the challenges, remote onboarding. As I'm sure we all suspected, not every company was doing remote onboarding, so that presented some challenges both for the employer and the candidates. Some companies are doing virtual interviews and then at the last minute are saying, hey, would you mind coming in? We'd like to meet with you in person. For the most part, when that is the case, the opportunity to say, I'm not comfortable coming in person is still presented and, you know, worked through with each candidate. You know, rewarding employees is something that's been going on. There was an increase in pay for the employees that are working as essential workers in warehouse or plants. Corporate employees were given Amazon gift cards or extra days off to help deal with their stress. And as we move down the list, talking about stress, wine was a big stress reliever for our group. So I personally relate that wine does help, or whatever your choice may be. But doing Zoom calls and happy hours to stay connected, and then certainly addressing company-wide, internally and externally, what current world events are going on, and taking a stance was something that was also addressed. And just to wrap it up, the advice that our group would give to job seekers is do not give up. There are companies still hiring. Continue to network heavily, as many of us are here doing today. A lot of groups have been very responsive to members that are in transition, and we're seeing a lot of camaraderie that we have not witnessed before. People really sticking together and sharing job leads with one another. So with that, Sharon, I will wrap up our section and pass it to Angela.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Evan. So again, not to reiterate what others have said, part of my group focused on a couple key industries, one of which two of us were in the retail sector, and talking about how we need to continue to hire for essential businesses within this time, and what we're doing to be able to move the process along for the hiring leaders that need to be able to interview folks that are in customer service and service types of roles. So we talked about the aspects of video interviewing or phone interviewing before moving anyone into an in-person interview to provide safety. We also talked about both in the retail sector as well as in the manufacturing and distribution spaces, offering candidates and new hires hazard pay. So the need for that to be able to secure them and to reduce turnover has certainly been key. We did talk, consistently, whether it be in the retail sector, whether it be in the distribution sector, or certainly in the engineering or pharma sector that all of our teams contributed, is that the hiring freezes continue in many of those areas, and that it's still a freeze, right? They're slowly coming off of the freeze, hopefully, but it's made it difficult to hire for some of the key positions. Universally, I think we've all shared that for our senior level positions, right, senior management roles, they are somewhat taking a hiatus right now for hiring, because how will we effectively be able to interview and onboard? One of the things that I thought was really interesting that Caitlin shared in our group is that from a candidate perspective in this market, that candidates are going to need to really perfect their COVID story. So if you are not working right now, whether it be through a job loss or whether it be through your own accord, how are you going to be able to share what you've been doing during this time to really keep your skills up? And we commented a little bit around that it feels a little bit like a rebound from 08, 09 when so many folks were unemployed. Universally, we didn't talk about this at length, but many companies are reducing their intern hiring, which is a key pipeline. So that creates a challenge. My organization onboarded interns, and candidly, we're finding challenges with those that are not sticking with us, and we're having a higher degree of resignations than what we've experienced in years past through that remote onboarding and training. And I think we also talked about the need to be able to quickly reach out to candidates and move the needle for mainly our distribution and retail spaces. So moving away from traditional phone calls and emails, but moving to more text recruiting and being able to build our brand and our story through those text campaigns is somewhat challenging, specifically when you want to be able to share to potential candidates any type of changes you're putting in place operationally to protect their health and safety. So want to just go through my notes? No, I think, and then in engagement. So from an engagement perspective, many of our teams are continuing to do daily huddles or weekly get-togethers to keep the teams connected and engaged. Celebrations of baby showers and things of the like that we're just doing through the similar Zoom or Teams meetings that we're doing here. So I think we're all getting quite comfortable with this. Okay. And with that, I forget who I'm supposed to turn it over to.
On the screen, I think it's Michael.
Yeah, it's me.
There you go, Michael, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I recognize we're tight on time, so I'll be briefer than I might normally. We had 5 participants in the breakout session, diverse, financial services, insurance, the essential business of uniform rental, and then consulting in the construction industry. So we had some really large representation of from large organizations to smaller organizations. The onboarding, big topic, but we've already talked about that. Here's a perspective that was brought up and shared by the group. The kind of our questions really focused on the questions that we generated prior to this session were around biggest challenges and changes in strategies and tools, etc. Where we went in this group was around the candidate perspective, which some of you have talked about a bit, but the challenges of connecting with and influencing and exciting passive candidates under these circumstances, or the low-tech people without the who are not tech savvy in a virtual environment. The interview platforms, the text and the various modes of communication are not familiar to every person in every industry, particularly in the uniform rental industry, where you're working with a lot of unskilled labor. That building a pipeline under those circumstances can be very difficult for someone in talent acquisition. Bruce brought up a point that I think is worth noting, and that's that perhaps we will need to reevaluate candidate traits or competencies in this new age. And then finally, just in terms of bringing people on board, there was some conversation around the importance for talent acquisition folks to be able to influence the hiring manager under these virtual circumstances and make them or help them feel comfortable with the viability of a particular candidate. One last point in terms of activity, just general activity, yeah, consistent with what others have said, slow down, push things out. But the one point I wanted to make was that organizations, large and small, have tended to become more conservative and more deliberate about identifying and confirming that a position is absolutely a key position, and there have been more people involved in that decision making. And with that, I will turn it over to Ryan.
Great. Thanks, Michael. I appreciate that. And trying to be respectful of time, I'll move through our points pretty quickly. We had a variety of different industries that we talked through: financial services, software, tech. We had recruiting, and we also had, Carl from Wawa talked about, the service industry. In recruiting and hiring was fairly split. We had, some that were on a pause, some that were not. We did look at, I think across the board, many of the strategic positions continuing to be active and recruited for. Two of the points that we spent a lot of time on were redeployment and repurposing. The fact that we've had a slowdown in a couple of areas in terms of recruiting and hiring has led to an opportunity for some TA members in particular groups to multitask, to do something different. We've had a few people that have jumped into different roles, which has been exciting. And that, I think, might propel a further discussion down the road in terms of when we begin to emerge from this, will there be a focus on internal talent? Some in our group have already had that conversation, have already started down that road and have a robust platform in place. I think others will have the opportunity to look at that in terms of repurposing, upskilling the groups that we have. And then the final point that we talked about was, in this environment with virtually everyone working remotely, the idea of hiring anyone anywhere, and the fact that many of the recruiting personnel and the recruiting professionals see that as a unique opportunity, because you can cast a wider net and you have a larger talent pool to find the best. The challenge will become in that change management, in getting that across to executives, into the C-suite, that can be a viable option, that if we continue down this road, there may be some positions that can and should remain remote. And in those situations, in order to find the best talent, casting that net might be one of the best ways to go, but it's certainly going to be something to overcome, and having those discussions as we start to get back to some semblance of normalcy. And now I'll turn it over to Kathleen.
Hi, everyone. I won't take up too much time. There were a lot of the same themes that we discussed. Represented in our group was transportation, consumer packaged goods, and legal and staffing. And so I'll just take a minute. Campbell's Soup was represented, and Vaughn from there had a really interesting take on culture, because that's something that, when you can't interview in person, you can't interview candidates in person, and the hiring managers can't see them. But more importantly, a culture like Campbell's is so strong and so important to candidates. What they did is they created videos of their campuses to give that look and feel for candidates, to really be able to kind of immerse themselves into the culture without actually physically being there. So I just wanted to call that out, because I thought, particularly for internships or positions that are required to be on those campuses full time when life goes back to normal, that they will have the opportunity to have already visited the campuses, even though it was virtual. So I just wanted to share that. And I will hand it over to you, Tony.
Hey, hello, everybody. One of the challenges is going last year, there's not enough time and everybody said everything. So that's just funny. So I'll be brief and kind of want to take it a little bit high level of, where the group came from. We had a multitude of different industries, nonprofit, telecommunications, and law and financial services. And certainly, for us and, for the time that we had some technical difficulties. We really kind of got into the challenges that we're facing, that probably a lot of you have too, relative to COVID. For some of us, like in the law firm, where your positions are really not revenue generators, had a very, very significant impact on whether they're going to be recruiting right now. And, even in financial services, such as myself, like industries in that respect, it's the future is unknown, right? I mean, we don't know if there's a second wave coming, and the organizations are taking steps to try to minimize, hopefully sometimes the inevitable of laying people off. So which is very similar, in the law industry that was represented in my firm. We have reduced our 401k match. And what's very ironic is the business that I'm in, 401ks is our business. So it's very, very, very interesting as it relates to that. And that's also going to impact, things like that are affecting your benefits plan, could affect talent. So those are things that we need to think about and overcome. In the nonprofit space, we had high volume recruiting, and where they're used to doing a lot of kind of class hiring events, if you will. And now that they can't do that, so they're kind of rethinking their practices of, okay, what technologies do we need to leverage in order to effectively meet the business demands, because their business really hasn't been as impacted as some of the others. And then there was an area where one organization, they really took a really good hard look and, really have great values in action. And relative to a lot of COVID and, the civil unrest that's out there, it really has an engaged CEO, and not just sitting up in the ivory tower, but actually making videos quite often and sharing perspective and concern. And their organization is surveying their associates and getting ideas and perspectives and then acting on them. So a lot of good stuff. And from there, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Schlegel.
I think what I'll do, and thank you, is just say ditto to all of the above. But one of the key things that I'd like to highlight is, so we did focus a little bit about those that are in job transition. And one of the things that was mentioned was, a lot of the times what we're seeing is, if we are job seekers, we are seeing a lot of advertisements for openings, but more or less what companies are doing is, and it's been mentioned before, pipelining. So when they are ready to build more of that hiring and to focus more on that forward direction, they'll have that pipeline of candidates. The one thing that we also talked about from a candidate perspective in terms of those that are in transition was definitely around focusing on networking, building your LinkedIn network, making sure that you're going out, you're reaching out to people, you're making yourself known to others. And then lastly, it really was just about, how to decipher when someone says to you, an organization says to you, hey, we're going to put a position on hold. What we need to do is we need to be able to, as candidates, follow up with those employers. They're not going to necessarily follow up with you. You need to follow up with them and just be very diligent about that. So we had a lot of dialogue around that, a little bit of a different angle from what the rest of the groups talked about, but I think it's value added. Because for those of us that are impacted in different ways, I think it's good advice that we can share across the teams here. So, but again, ditto to everything else. And I will pass it over to Steve.
Thanks, Lynn. So I'll try and be quick too, because we really want to get to some questions. It's about 2:02 now, so I'll try and be, less than 2 minutes. But 3 people in our group, they were a great group. They were in manufacturing and transportation. One talent acquisition leader was just recently let go. We really focused on, hiring in this post-COVID, which we're still in COVID, but, what's it look like? The recession that they say we're in, which let's face it, we are. We're all seeing things starting to come out of it, whether it's Ving or W or whatever it does. And then talking about the social unrest and really, diversity training or bias training. What's going to attract talent, right? What's going to attract talent to your organization? And we all, I think, agree that it was culture as well as your brand. And that really comes down to, in this COVID world, of being able to work remotely, being held accountable, and having that culture where you have that flexibility. But also, we all talked about the video streaming. That's how we're recruiting. But a lot of the different ways we're going to be able to vet talent which is assessments. We think assessments will become much more robust. You've probably heard of predictive index, which really, monitors your core competencies, your traits. And, it's not an end all, but I think companies are going to really have to be really nimble and flexible, especially in these times of hiring people, because our company, Contemporary Staffing, that we talked about, we're definitely are billing less clients because a lot of our clients went down, but we talked about industries that are hot. And right now what's hot in our company at Contemporary Staffing is mortgage and banking and healthcare insurance. Those industries are booming, and they've made up for the drop for us, but we are seeing a bit of a spike of more clients that were in manufacturing and transportation say, bring some of the contractors back. Direct hire has been very soft, but I think the key has been to get and recruit in this environment is to stay relevant through webinars, to build relationships, but really stay in front of them. And I think what we've been doing, we just hired 7 new account managers that have started all in the last 6 weeks, new in our organization internally. We have a little over 100 and some people internally at Contemporary Staffing. And then our contract base, keeping them engaged and robust, keeping them engaged is mission critical. And that's through communication, I think, is key, and living by our core values and our culture. So with that, I will turn it over to Scott and we can get to questions.
Okay, thank you, Steve. We are going to wrap up here. We appreciate everybody that's been patient and participated. We've got a lot of good information. It's a lot of the same things, but the companies that I had represented in our group included SEPTA. And because the city of Philadelphia is in such a shutdown state, it's been very, very rough on them. But they are getting the green light to start going back, and the turnover has been significant. But as Philly goes, so does SEPTA. So we've got all these high rises here. Are they going to be a third filled, a quarter filled? We don't know. SEPTA's trying to be creative with like 2-3 day passes for people that are only going to be coming into the office a few days a week. But they do have a green light to start hiring. And so that's good news. We had someone from the pharmacy industry. They've been busy for the most part, and working from home. Everybody's working from home, of course. And we had 2 people from healthcare, Virtua and Cooper, and both have seen a challenge in their hiring, and they are starting also to open back up. One of our participants is going to be asked to come back to the office full time, starting on June 22nd. She does have some anxiety about that. Everyone's stress level was good. The consensus seems to be people like working from home, and they like the flexibility. So, it's going to be tough to get people back into the office. I think that's going to be a big issue for the return to work strategies. So that's it. I'm going to wrap up. Sharon, I don't know, I'll flip it back to you if you want to have some closing comments, or you want some questions, or are we just going to close?
Well, if anybody has any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat or unmute yourself. I think you can do that if I'm correct, Nick. But we haven't had any specific questions. I do just want to say I'm grateful that all of you came sharing, and we are going to put together a summary of what we learned. Thank goodness for all these recordings. And TALA looks forward to bringing more of these types of Zoom meetings to our community. So if you have an idea or if you want to present something, just reach out to any of us and we're happy to coordinate around you. We can make you a thought leader, okay? All right, everybody. This has been great.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Thanks. I know.
Hey, Sharon, did you want to stay on and debrief for a few minutes?
Sure.
Let's see how to get out of here.
And this is Nick.
Hello, this is Lynn. Is that Scott?
It is.
Can you hear me? Thanks. This is
can.
Lynn
Hi,
Kaplan.
Lynn.
Hi. I was wondering, and I wanted to say this, is it possible to get people's emails? Because I am looking for something new since I am on transition too at this point. So I would love to, you know, network with people and try to get myself working, because I don't like being, I mean, I've been doing a lot of stuff, but I want to
Right.
be working.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. It's a good question. Why don't you and I follow up like offline? I know you sent me an email, and we'll talk about, you know, that, because the issue with distributing lists and stuff, sometimes we want to respect privacy
Yeah.
of the participants. So, you know, we would probably need to get permission. But why don't you and I speak, and you know, we'll figure something out.
All right. Thanks.
You're
All right.
welcome.
Have a good one.
Thank you, Lynn.
Bye,
All
Lynn.
right. Bye. Bye. Thank you, Sharon.
So
Hey, Sharon, it's Nick, real quick. Sorry, Scott.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm going to drop because I got another meeting I need to jump to, but you guys can have this line. So feel free to debrief, and I made Maribel the host.
Okay.
Thank you, Nick.
No problem.
All right. Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Thank you.
So it looks like we still have a couple members that